Get out, now, before I throw you out myself." The security guard drove a hard hand into Amara Whitmore's shoulder, forcing her toward the hotel entrance. "Can't people like you read?" he sneered. "This is a five-star hotel, not a soup kitchen." Another guard spat near her worn sneakers. "That shirt is too cheap. Everything about you is too cheap for this floor." Behind the concierge desk, Preston Vale burst into laughter. "She smells like she came straight from a shelter." Mallory Pierce held up her phone and continued recording, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Blair Kensington curled her lips into a cruel smile. "Trash belongs in the alley, sweetheart." Amara stood before them in a $12 gray Hanes t-shirt, faded jeans, and old sneakers. "I have a reservation," she said quietly. The staff erupted into even louder laughter. They had no idea that, within moments, every person humiliating her would lose their job. But the story had begun long before Amara entered that lobby. Rain tapped softly against the windows of a small Brooklyn apartment as the city slowly came to life. Amara poured coffee from a dented metal pot, took a careful sip, and looked toward a framed photograph hanging on the wall. The photograph showed a tired but smiling woman in a gray housekeeping uniform holding a little girl with pigtails. "Good morning, Mama," Amara whispered. The woman in the picture was Lillian Whitmore, Amara's mother, who had been gone for many years. Amara opened her closet. Inside were several plain gray t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and 1 pair of worn Nike sneakers. There were no expensive labels and nothing designed to attract attention. She wore a modest Timex watch and a thin gold chain. Hidden beneath the chain was her mother's wedding ring. Amara dressed quickly. Gray shirt, faded jeans, old sneakers. She gathered her natural curls and secured them with a simple clip. Then she looked into the mirror and gave herself a single, quiet nod. No one seeing her would have guessed that she was worth $3.2 billion. Amara Whitmore was the founder, chairwoman, and chief executive officer of Meridian Equity Partners. Forbes had named her one of the 50 most powerful women in American business. She had testified before Congress. The livelihoods of 14,000 employees depended on the company she had built. Yet she still purchased $12 shirts from Target. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate choice. When Amara was a child in Detroit, she often sat on a folding chair inside the staff room of a downtown luxury hotel while her mother worked. Lillian would sit beside her during short breaks, eating cold sandwiches between housekeeping shifts. One day, Amara noticed the deep cracks covering her mother's hands. "Mama, your hands are bleeding again." Lillian smiled gently. "Bleach is hard on the skin, baby. That's all." Lillian worked double shifts for very little money. She spent long days cleaning rooms, changing heavy sheets, scrubbing bathrooms, and pushing overloaded carts through silent hotel corridors. She returned home with swollen knees, cracked hands, and constant pain in her back. During a holiday shift, an impatient businessman threw hot coffee at her because he believed she was moving too slowly with the room service cart. Lillian did not shout. She did not defend herself. "I'm so sorry, sir," she repeated. "I'm so sorry." She apologized because losing the job would have meant losing the ability to feed her daughter. Inside the staff bathroom, young Amara pressed a cold cloth against her mother's burn. Her small hands trembled with anger. "Mama, one day I'm going to own places like this." "Baby, don't say things like that." "I will, Mama, and no one who works for me will ever be treated the way they treat you." Lillian kissed her daughter's forehead. "All right, baby, I believe you." Years later, Amara was finally about to keep that promise. It was the most important day of her career. Later that afternoon, she was scheduled to sign a $2.8 billion agreement to acquire Holloway Hospitality Group. Holloway owned 52 luxury hotels throughout North America. Its most prestigious property was the Crestwood Grand Hotel on Fifth Avenue, a 5-star landmark resembling the very hotels where Lillian had once cleaned rooms. The official signing would take place in the penthouse boardroom. There would be cameras, journalists, champagne, executives, and attorneys in perfectly tailored suits. But Amara had developed a private ritual before every major hospitality acquisition. She called it the housekeeper test. She would arrive at the flagship property alone and without warning, dressed as her mother had dressed on her days away from work. There would be no assistants, security team, or executive entourage. There would only be Amara Whitmore, a black woman wearing a $12 t-shirt, entering a lobby where a single night could cost $2,000. She would watch. She would listen. She would observe how the employees treated people they believed did not matter. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from Sloan Avery, her chief of staff. "Are you going to the Crestwood first? Do you want someone with you?" Amara typed a reply. "No one. I want to see them clearly." "Be careful." "I always am." Amara picked up a canvas duffel bag. Inside it, she placed a folded blazer, a leather notebook, and a small velvet box containing her mother's pearl earrings. She paused beside the framed photograph and touched the glass. "This is for you, Mama." After locking her apartment, she took the train into Midtown. She stood holding this metal pole like every other passenger. A businessman in an expensive Brioni suit noticed her sneakers and subtly shifted away from her. Amara saw him move. She was accustomed to it. She walked several blocks through the light rain, carrying a warm cup of coffee as banners moved above Fifth Avenue. Eventually, she entered the revolving doors of the Crestwood Grand Hotel. Marble columns towered above the lobby. A crystal chandelier scattered light across the polished floor. A pianist played Gershwin near the corner. The air smelled of fresh lilies and extraordinary wealth. 4 employees immediately turned toward her. They saw the gray t-shirt. They saw the worn sneakers. They saw a black woman entering alone with a canvas duffel bag. And they made their decision. The revolving door whispered shut behind Amara. Her sneakers made a soft squeaking sound against the marble. Preston Vale stood behind the concierge desk in a tailored navy suit. The moment he saw her, his jaw tightened. He turned his back and spoke loudly enough for the other employees to hear. "Oh God, not today." At the front desk, Mallory Pierce nudged her coworker. "Look at what just walked in." Amara approached calmly, holding the duffel bag in one hand and the coffee in the other. "Good afternoon," she said. "I would like to check in. The reservation is under A. Whitmore." Preston did not turn around. He pretended to type on the computer. Amara waited in patient silence. Eventually, Preston looked up. His nose wrinkled as if an unpleasant odor had entered the room. "Deliveries go through the rear entrance. The service door is on 54th Street. "I am not making a delivery. I am a guest." Preston laughed sharply. "A guest dressed like that?" He gestured toward her shirt with one manicured hand. "Ma'am, our rooms begin at $1,900 per night. I don't believe you're in the right building." Mallory had already started recording with her phone. She aimed the camera toward Amara's sneakers and slowly tilted it upward to capture the gray Hanes shirt. Trying not to laugh, she shared the video in the employees' private group chat. The messages arrived immediately. Target just walked into the lobby. "Is that a dollar store shirt? Security needs to remove her." Amara heard the phones vibrating. She noticed Mallory filming her. She said nothing. Instead, she gently placed her coffee on the counter. "My reservation was confirmed earlier. The presidential suite was prepaid for 3 nights. Mallory snorted. "Of course it was, sweetheart." She slowly typed into the computer, clicking through several screens while performing an exaggerated search. Then she made a small sound with her tongue. "I don't see anything under that name. Are you sure you booked this hotel?" "I am certain." "Do you have a credit card?" Amara reached into her pocket and presented a matte black American Express Centurion card. It was the type of card with no preset spending limit and an annual fee larger than many people's monthly salaries. Mallory took it, glanced at it, and laughed. "Oh, honey, this is obviously fake." She raised it for Preston to see. He laughed with her. "Where did you find that, sweetheart?" "A flea market." "I would like you to process the card." "I am not processing a counterfeit card. Do you have a real one?" Amara handed over her New York driver's license. Mallory barely examined it. "I can't verify this. Step aside. We have actual guests waiting." Behind Amara, several white customers had formed an orderly line. A middle-aged couple wore coordinated designer jackets. Behind them stood a businessman in a charcoal suit. Mallory invited the couple forward with a warm, professional smile. "Welcome to the Crestwood Grand. Are you checking in?" They were processed almost immediately. Keys were handed over. A bellhop was called. The businessman received the same efficient treatment. Amara watched in silence. She had moved several steps away, exactly as instructed. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. Amara had spent a lifetime learning not to react in rooms like this. She understood that the moment a black woman raised her voice, the room could rewrite the entire story. She would suddenly become angry, aggressive, dangerous, the villain inside her own humiliation. So Amara remained silent. She waited, and she memorized every face. Preston finally turned toward her and sighed as though she were an inconvenience he could no longer tolerate. "Ma'am, I am going to ask you one final time. Leave the lobby." "I have a reservation." You have nothing. Go. A new voice entered the conversation. It was polished, cold, and falsely sweet. Preston, what exactly is happening here? Blair Kensington, the assistant general manager. She was 42, with blonde hair pulled into a severe knot. She wore a black pencil skirt, bright red lipstick, and carried a clipboard beneath one arm like a weapon. She stopped in front of Amara. Then she did something Amara would never forget. Blair slowly walked around her, inspecting her as though she were evaluating damaged merchandise. Her eyes moved across the gray shirt, faded jeans, and worn shoes. She clicked her tongue. Oh, I understand. She spoke with exaggerated sympathy. Sweetheart, that shirt is Hanes, isn't it? A cheap multi-pack from Target? I recognize it. My gardener wears the same kind. Several onlookers laughed. Preston smiled. Mallory continued recording. And those jeans, Blair continued, they look like they're from another decade. Amara's jaw tightened slightly. It was the first visible crack in her composure. Blair leaned closer and lowered her voice into a theatrical whisper loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. Honey, this is the Crestwood Grand. This is not a shelter. We have standards here. You understand what standards are, don't you? Amara drew a slow breath. I would like to speak with the general manager. Blair released a high, delicate laugh. Oh, you certainly will, sweetheart. But first, we must deal with this situation. Our policy requires us to search the belongings of suspicious people who enter the lobby. That is not hotel policy. It is today, honey. Blair turned toward Mallory. Call Grant and have him come down. Mallory smiled. Gladly. Blair faced Amara again. In the meantime, why don't you empty your little bag and show us what you brought inside? I will not do that. Oh, now we're refusing instructions. Interesting. She glanced toward Preston. Make a note of it. Preston wrote nothing. He only smiled. Amara looked around the lobby. Several people were openly staring. Some were smiling. Others were recordings on their phones. Only one elderly woman in a beige cashmere coat looked genuinely disturbed. Her name was Eleanor Hart. At 70, she had seen this kind of cruelty before. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her handbag. Eleanor moved forward slightly but did not speak. Not yet. She watched. Amara kept her hands relaxed beside her. She did not cross her arms or clench her fists. She knew cameras were pointed toward her. She understood that the footage would eventually appear somewhere. Preston leaned over the desk. His voice became even crueler now that Blair was encouraging him. I'm going to be honest with you. People like you cannot simply walk into places like this. You have to earn the privilege of being here. You cannot arrive in a cheap t-shirt and expect to be treated like one of our real guests. People like me, Amara said quietly. It was not a question. Exactly, people who don't belong. A bellhop pushed a cart of designer luggage through the lobby. He looked toward Amara and laughed. She smells like a laundry basket. The staff laughed even harder. A passing valet supervisor joined them. I've seen better clothing on the housekeeping floor. The remark struck Amara like a slap. The housekeeping floor was where her mother had once spent her life. For a brief moment, Amara's fingers curled. Then they relaxed. Eleanor Hart could no longer remain silent. Excuse me, she said. I don't know what all of you believe you're doing, but this is shameful. Blair turned toward her with the same artificial smile. Ma'am, this situation does not involve you. Please enjoy your stay. I absolutely will not. Amara gently shook her head. Eleanor fell silent only because Amara had asked her to. Her eyes filled with tears. She sat on a velvet bench and removed her phone. She began recording as well, but she was not filming to mock Amara. She was filming to bear witness. Amara spoke again. Her voice remained calm and clear. I would like to ask the question for the record, especially for every camera currently pointed toward me. The employees froze momentarily. Something had changed in her voice. Would any of this be happening if I had entered wearing a $5,000 suit? Silence followed. Preston scoffed. Mallory rolled her eyes. Sweetheart, this has nothing to do with race, she said. This is about standards. I did not mention race, Amara replied. You did. The lobby became completely quiet. At that moment, a large shadow spread across the marble floor behind her. Grant Rourke had arrived. Grant filled the entrance. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed approximately 240 pounds. His head was shaved, and a private military tattoo extended along the side of his neck. The Crestwood security uniform stretched tightly across his shoulders. Two guards followed him. One rested a hand on a holstered taser, not drawing the weapon, but ensuring that Amara could see it. Blair gave Grant a small nod. Grant stopped less than a foot away from Amara and looked down at her. His breath carried the smell of cold coffee and mint gum. "Ma'am, you are leaving. Now." "I have not agreed to leave." "You don't get to give consent in my lobby, sweetheart. Let's move." He reached toward the duffel bag. Amara tightened her grip. "Do not touch my belongings. You have no legal authority to search them." "Legal authority?" Grant laughed harshly and looked toward one of the guards. "Did you hear that, Nolan? She's talking about legal authority." The guard laughed. "A lawyer wearing Hanes." Grant tore the duffel bag from Amara's hand. The zipper opened violently. He turned the bag upside down and emptied its contents across the marble floor. Everything fell at once. The folded navy blazer, the leather notebook, 2 pens, the small velvet jewelry box, a folder marked "Confidential Holloway Acquisition" in red lettering. The entire lobby gasped. Amara did not move. She stood completely still, her hands open beside her body. Grant crouched and searched the blazer pockets. He opened the notebook and flipped through pages of Amara's private handwriting. He made no effort to appear professional. Then he picked up the velvet box. Using his thumb, he opened it. Inside, resting against cream-colored silk, were 2 small pearl earrings. They were old and not especially valuable. They were the only jewelry Lillian Whitmore had ever owned. Grant lifted one earring into the light. "Where did you steal these?" Amara's entire body became still in a different way. It was no longer the calm stillness of self-control. It was the silence before something shattered. "They belonged to my mother." "Of course they did." Grant tossed the earring. It struck the marble with a sharp click, rolled across the floor, and disappeared beneath a velvet bench. Blair giggled behind her clipboard. Eleanor stood so quickly that her handbag fell from her lap. She hurried toward the bench, knelt, and carefully retrieved the pearl. Her hands trembled with anger. Eleanor returned to Amara and gently pressed the earring into her palm. "I am so sorry, sweetheart. I am recording everything, every second." Amara closed her fingers around the pearl. For the first time since entering the lobby, she closed her eyes, only for a single breath. When she opened them again, they were made of steel. Grant had not finished searching her property. He pointed toward this folder with the red lettering. "What is this?" "Confidential." "Of course it is. More stolen documents?" He reached for the folder. "Do not touch that." "Or what?" Grant lifted it and opened the first page. Something changed in his expression. His eyes moved across the document. He turned to the next page and then another. Finally, he looked toward Blair. "Blair, what is Holloway?" Her smile weakened. "What?" "Holloway Hospitality Group. That's the company that owns this hotel, right?" "Yes, but..." "These documents describe a $2.8 billion acquisition scheduled to close today." Blair's face tightened. "Grant, the documents are fake. Everything about her is fake. Put them down." Grant continued staring at the signature page. Printed clearly in bold letters were the words, "Amara Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer, Meridian Equity Partners." He slowly looked up at her. Amara returned his gaze without changing her expression. For a brief moment, Grant's training created uncertainty. He hesitated. Blair immediately noticed. "What is wrong with you? She printed that from the internet. Remove her from the lobby." Grant forced the doubt from his mind. He stood and moved close enough that his chest almost touched Amara's. His voice became low. "You have a few seconds to walk out voluntarily. Otherwise, I will carry you." "I am waiting for someone." "No one is coming for you." He placed a hand on her shoulder. The touch was not violent yet. It was a warning. At that moment, General Manager Everett Sinclair descended the grand staircase. He was 58 and wore a $6,000 navy Brioni suit. His silver hair had been carefully combed backward, and small wire-framed glasses rested on his face. He walked with the slow confidence of a man who had rarely been told no. Everett did not greet Amara. He did not even look directly at her. Instead, he spoke loudly to Grant so that the entire lobby could hear him. "Grant, remove this woman from the property immediately. I will not allow routine vagrancy to disturb our paying guests." Routine vagrancy. The word struck the lobby like a hammer. Everett turned away and adjusted one cufflink. As he moved toward the elevators, he added another insult over his shoulder. "Some people simply do not understand private property or acceptable clothing." Eleanor was openly crying now, although her phone continued recording. Amara watched Everett walk away. She remained silent. Grant's fingers tightened around her shoulder. He gave her a small but humiliating shove. It was not strong enough to knock her down. It was strong enough to force her backward. Amara stumbled half a step. The lobby gasped. Eleanor shouted, "That is enough." Amara still did not raise her voice. She understood something none of them understood. She was the person holding the detonator. Amara steadied herself. She did not strike Grant. She did not shout. She reached into her pocket and removed an older iPhone with a small crack across one corner of the screen. She called a single number. Sloan Avery answered immediately. Amara spoke only a few words. "Sloan, bring the documents. Front lobby." She ended the call. Grant laughed. "Is she calling a boyfriend? A social worker?" Mallory cackled. "Bring the documents." "What documents? Her food stamp forms?" Preston doubled over laughing. "This is becoming pathetic." Amara returned the phone to her pocket. Then she slowly turned toward Everett, who had paused near the elevators to watch the spectacle. "Mr. Sinclair, you may want to remain here." Everett turned with an amused expression. "Excuse me? You will want to witness what happens next." Everett laughed confidently and glanced at his Rolex. "Ma'am, I don't know who you believe you are, but I have an important meeting later today." "Your meeting is with me, Mr. Sinclair." The lobby fell silent. Even the pianist lifted his hands from the keys. For a moment, the only sounds were the air conditioning system and the faint electronic noise from several phones still recording. Everett's smile froze. "I beg your pardon?" The penthouse boardroom meeting, the Holloway acquisition signing, the $2.8 billion transaction. Everett took one step away from the elevator. "Ma'am, that meeting is with me." Blair's clipboard slipped from her fingers. It struck the marble and skidded across the floor. All color disappeared from Preston's face. Mallory continued holding the phone because her mind had not yet understood what was happening. Grant stepped away from Amara. His hand left her shoulder. Outside the revolving doors, several events unfolded at once. 3 black Cadillac Escalades arrived in a tight convoy. A Wall Street Journal reporter arriving for a separate assignment noticed the disturbance through the lobby windows and began moving toward the entrance. Then, a tall black woman in a navy suit entered, carrying a thick leather portfolio. Sloan Avery had arrived. She was not alone. Sloan crossed the lobby with the calm authority of someone who understood that, very soon, she and Amara would control the entire building. Behind her walked Darius Cole, general counsel for Meridian Equity Partners. Darius stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and wore a charcoal suit. A thick leather portfolio rested beneath his arm. 2 Meridian board members followed him. Behind them came a 3-person media team consisting of a photographer, a videographer, and a communications director. The Wall Street Journal reporter, Julian Cross, entered behind them with his notebook already open. The pianist did not resume playing. Sloan walked directly toward Amara without looking at Grant. Grant had moved farther away. His hands had drifted from the taser on his belt. His body understood the danger before his mind fully accepted it. Sloan's voice was low and warm, but only when addressing Amara. "Ms. Whitmore, are you injured? What happened to your belongings?" "Ms. Whitmore." The 2 words echoed through the marble lobby. Preston made a choking sound. Mallory's phone remained raised, but her thumb had gone still. Blair stood with her mouth open. Everett had not moved from the elevator. His face had turned almost white. Sloan crouched to collect Amara's possessions. Amara stopped her. "Leave them where they are, Sloan. They are evidence now." Sloan nodded and stood. Darius stepped forward and cleared his throat. He spoke clearly and loudly enough for every camera to record him. "For the official record, and for the Wall Street Journal representative who has just entered, my name is Darius Cole. I serve as general counsel for Meridian Equity Partners." The woman standing in this lobby, whose belongings were unlawfully searched, whose personal property was thrown onto the floor, and who was physically assaulted by the hotel's head of security, is Ms. Amara Whitmore. He paused and allowed the name to settle over the room. Ms. Whitmore is the founder, chairwoman, and chief executive officer of Meridian Equity Partners. The lobby remained completely silent. Meridian manages $3.2 billion in assets. Ms. Whitmore has been featured by Forbes, has testified before Congress, and is recognized as one of the 50 most powerful women in American business. Darius opened his portfolio and removed a thick stack of bound documents. These are the closing documents for Meridian's acquisition of Holloway Hospitality Group. The purchase price is $2.8 billion. The agreement will be executed later today. He slowly turned toward Everett. Once the transaction closes, Mr. Sinclair, Ms. Whitmore will become the sole owner of Holloway Hospitality Group. She will control all 52 properties, including this hotel. She will control the payroll. She will control your employment contract. She will be your property owner, your employer, and your superior. The sound spreading through the lobby was smaller than a gasp and somehow more devastating. It was the collective sound of everyone losing their breath. Mallory's phone slipped from her hand. It struck the marble, and the screen cracked from one side to the other. She did not bend to retrieve it. Preston stumbled backward until his leg struck a decorative ceramic urn. The urn wobbled and crashed into pieces. No one looked toward it. Blair's skin had turned gray. "Oh my God," she whispered repeatedly. Grant raised both hands with his palms open, like a man attempting to prove he had never touched a weapon. Everett looked the worst of all. His face resembled blank paper. His mouth opened and closed without producing words. Amara finally spoke. Her voice remained soft. It did not need to be loud. "I entered this lobby a short while ago." She calmly walked toward the front desk. The employees moved aside as if water were parting before her. Amara turned the computer monitor so the people in the lobby and Julian Cross could see it. A Whitmore, presidential suite. Checked in electronically earlier this morning. Prepaid. She pointed toward another note in the reservation record. And here is an entry created by Mallory Pierce. VIP guest. Do not disturb. Mallory began crying. "You knew," Amara said. "All of you knew." She looked at the pearl earring Eleanor had returned to her. Then she carefully placed it inside the velvet box Sloane handed her. Amara turned toward the gathered employees and guests. "You watched me enter. You looked at my shirt. You looked at my shoes. You looked at my skin. And you made a decision." She paused. "I am not angry. I am clear. And clarity is far more dangerous to people like you than anger could ever be." Amara looked at Darius. "Proceed, now." Darius reached into the portfolio and removed 5 sealed envelopes. Each envelope carried a different name. He lifted the first one. Everett Sinclair, General Manager. Everett's knees weakened. He placed a hand against the wall. Darius approached and put the envelope into his hand. Notice of termination for cause, effective immediately. Your access to this property will end today. Your company vehicle, corporate card, and building credentials are revoked. Recovery proceedings will begin against your $1.2 million signing bonus. A referral has been submitted to the New York State Division of Human Rights regarding a documented pattern of discrimination. Everett made a sound that was almost a laugh, but mostly a sob. "Ms. Whitmore, please, may I speak with you privately?" Amara did not look toward him. "No, Mr. Sinclair. You had every opportunity to speak with me publicly. You chose how to use it." Darius opened the next envelope. Blair Kensington, Assistant General Manager. Blair stumbled forward and grabbed Amara's wrist. "Ms. Whitmore, please, I have 2 daughters. I didn't mean any of it. I swear." Amara looked down at Blair's hand. Then she carefully removed Blair's fingers from her wrist, one at a time. She lowered Blair's hand to her side as gently as though she were returning a handbag. "Ms. Kensington, I have spent my life watching women like you speak to women like my mother. You meant every word when you believed I could not afford to hear it. The fact that I heard you does not change what those words meant." Blair collapsed onto her knees and began sobbing. The press photographer quietly took one picture. It would appear across national news broadcasts. Darius raised the next envelope. "Preston Vale, head concierge." Preston began shaking his head before Darius finished reading. "No, this is a mistake. I was doing my job." "Your job," Amara replied, "was to check in a registered guest. You chose to perform for your coworkers instead. There is a difference." Preston accepted the envelope with a hand that would not stop trembling. Darius continued. "Mallory Pierce, front desk supervisor." Mallory cried silently as tears moved down her face. Darius lifted her broken phone from the floor and offered it to Officer Renee Brooks, who had entered with another police officer after being called during the confrontation. "Officer, this device contains a recording made without consent inside the lobby. The video was distributed through an internal employee group chat for the purpose of humiliating the chief executive officer of Meridian Equity Partners. It is evidence in a pending civil rights complaint." Officer Brooks placed the phone inside an evidence bag, sealed it, and signed the label. "Please," Mallory whispered. "Please, ma'am, I will lose everything." Amara looked at her without hatred. Her expression carried something harder. Ms. Pierce, you recorded a stranger because you wanted to humiliate her. That recording will now teach you what humiliation actually feels like. Learn from it. Darius raised the final envelope. Grant Rourke, Director of Security. Grant had already removed his radio and held it forward as an act of surrender. Officer Brooks approached him. Mr. Rourke, turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for third-degree assault, unlawful search, and obstruction. Grant turned. The handcuffs closed around his wrists. As the officers led him past Amara, he muttered an apparent slur beneath his breath. Officer Brooks' jaw tightened. She wrote in her notebook, "Verbal slur directed toward the victim during arrest. Documented for the record." Amara did not react. She gave Grant one small nod. "Explain it to the judge, Mr. Rourke." The revolving doors carried him into the rain. Camera flashes erupted outside. Sloan stepped beside Amara. "Ma'am, the signing meeting will begin soon." Amara lifted the duffel bag and adjusted the strap across her shoulder. "Then we should not be late." Eleanor remained seated on the velvet bench, visibly shaken. Amara walked towards her and crouched so that they were at eye level. "Thank you for speaking. And thank you for recording what happened." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I would have done it for anyone." "I know," Amara replied. "That is why it matters." Amara stood and walked past the crying former employees toward the elevators. The lobby was no longer the same lobby she had entered. She did not look back. The story soon exploded across the internet. Mallory's own recording, the video she had created to mock Amara and distribute through the staff group chat, was leaked by an employee who did not want to be associated with the scandal. Before long, it appeared everywhere. TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. The caption spread even faster than the footage. Hotel staff mocked a black CEO for dressing too cheaply. Moments later, they were all fired. The video accumulated billions of views. 2 hashtags began trending at the same time. Hashtag Crestwood Shame became the leading topic on X. Hashtag $12 CEO followed closely behind. Target stores across the country sold out of Gray Hanes multi-packs. The basic white Nike Court Royale sneakers Amara had worn also disappeared from stores. Resellers began offering them for several times the original $65 retail price. Teenagers started calling them the Amara Whitmore shoes. The New York Times placed the story on the front page of its business section. CNN led with it. Daytime talk shows devoted full segments to the confrontation. Essence selected Amara for an upcoming cover. At her request, she wore the same gray t-shirt. Julian Cross of the Wall Street Journal published an article that became one of the most widely discussed pieces in modern business journalism. Its headline read, "The $12 t-shirt that cost a hotel chain $2.8 billion. Amara agreed to only one television interview. She appeared on CBS Mornings wearing the same gray shirt, worn sneakers, and her natural hair. The anchor asked the question everyone wanted answered. Ms. Whitmore, why didn't you simply tell them who you were? Amara looked directly into the camera rather than at the anchor. Because my mother could not. Because the housekeeper coming up through the service elevator cannot. Because the black woman who enters a hotel tomorrow in a Hanes shirt may not be able to. They were not only mocking my clothes. They were mocking every woman who has entered a room and been told, without anyone saying the words, that she did not belong." The clip was shared more than 100 million times. The legal consequences arrived rapidly. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund announced a class action review of guest treatment complaints involving the Crestwood Grand. Former guests began coming forward. Most were black women. One was a Latina military veteran who had been denied service in the hotel bar while wearing her uniform. Every one of them had previously filed a complaint with Holloway Hospitality Group. Each complaint had been quietly settled for a small amount, followed by a non-disclosure agreement. The FBI Civil Rights Division opened a federal investigation. Because the Crestwood operated across state lines, the matter fell within federal jurisdiction. Investigators subpoenaed internal emails. The contents were devastating. Everett Sinclair had previously distributed a memorandum to front-of-house employees titled Guest Aesthetic Guidelines. In the document, he'd instructed staff members to identify guests who did not meet the hotel's preferred visual standard. He used the phrase appearance profiling more than once. In another group email, Blair Kensington had made a racist joke about low-income guests wearing bonnets. The Crestwood employee group chat contained hundreds of messages written over a prolonged period. Most of the guests mocked in those messages were people of color. Mallory had created a nickname for Amara soon after she entered the hotel. Cleaning Lady Number 4. When that information became public, the internet erupted again. Grant Rourke faced federal charges. They included third-degree assault, unlawful search, and deprivation of rights under color of authority because he had acted in an official security capacity at a federally insured property. Investigators discovered previous excessive force complaints from his work as a private contractor. Those complaints had also been buried. His effort to negotiate a favorable plea collapsed when public outrage made leniency politically impossible. Grant was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution to Amara. Amara redirected the entire amount to the family of a hotel housekeeper who had died in a workplace accident in Atlanta. Civil lawsuits followed. Meridian financed 6 separate cases on behalf of previous Crestwood guests whose complaints had been suppressed. The combined settlements totaled $18.6 million. Amara personally donated an equal amount of her own money to establish a new legal defense organization. She selected the name herself, the Dignity Fund. Its purpose was to assist women and men working in service and hospitality who faced discrimination based on race, social class, or appearance. Several leading hospitality associations permanently barred Everett Sinclair from the industry. He filed a wrongful termination lawsuit. The court dismissed it. He appealed. The appeal was also dismissed. His marriage ended during the continuing public scandal. Blair Kensington's husband, a real estate broker, left her soon afterward. She eventually found work stocking shelves overnight at a regional grocery chain in New Jersey. Her supervisor was a black woman in her 40s who treated Blair with calm professionalism during every shift. Blair never spoke about the irony, but it often kept her awake at night. Preston attempted to rebuild his image as a lifestyle influencer. His first video received tens of thousands of negative reactions within hours. He deleted the entire account. Mallory uploaded a long, tearful apology to YouTube. The most popular comment beneath it received hundreds of thousands of likes. Cleaning Lady Number 4 says hello. The Crestwood Grand itself was placed under a complete operational audit. More than 200 positions were reviewed. 12 employees were terminated for documented patterns of discrimination. Every remaining worker received a salary increase. Most of those employees were people of color who had quietly endured Everett's leadership for years. The workers held a union recognition vote. An overwhelming majority voted in favor. New anti-discrimination training was developed in consultation with experienced black housekeepers. Among them were women who had worked beneath Everett's management and had never before been asked for their professional opinions. One of those women was Yvette Brooks. Yvette had supervised the hotel's overnight housekeeping staff for 22 years. Months after the incident, Amara would give her responsibility for the entire property. But that belonged to another chapter of the story. Eventually, the luxury hotel on 5th Avenue reopened under a new name. Large brushed bronze letters appeared above the revolving entrance. The Lillian Whitmore Grand. Inside the lobby, directly across from the front desk where Preston had refused to check Amara in, hung a large photograph inside a gold frame. The picture showed a tired woman in a gray housekeeping uniform holding a little girl with pigtails. Beneath it was a brass plaque. Lillian Whitmore Housekeeper, this hotel is her house. Every new employee was brought to the photograph on their first day. They were told about the hot coffee thrown during the holiday shift. They heard about the young girl who had cleaned her mother's burn and made a promise. They heard about the $12 shirt. Beside the photograph, inside a smaller display case, hung the gray Hanes t-shirt Amara had worn during the confrontation. A plaque beneath it read, "Human dignity is not measured by the price of clothing. If you disagree, you do not belong here. Amara Whitmore." During the grand reopening, Amara entered through the same revolving doors wearing the same outfit. The gray Hanes shirt. The faded jeans, the worn sneakers. This time, the entire lobby rose and applauded. Yvette Brooks stood behind the front desk wearing a crisp manager's blazer. After decades of cleaning hotel rooms during overnight shifts, she was now the general manager of the flagship property. She extended a key card. "Ms. Whitmore, your presidential suite." Amara looked down at the card but did not accept it. "Give it to the next housekeeper who works a double shift during the holidays. Make the room complimentary. Every year, at every Holloway property, forever." Yvette's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, ma'am." The new hotel policy appeared on a card inside every employee locker. No dress code in the lobby, no appearance profiling. Every guest must be greeted with the same respect, regardless of clothing. If you cannot follow this standard, you cannot work here. Eleanor Hart traveled from Connecticut for the reopening. Amara embraced her in the middle of the lobby. Photographs of the two women appeared in newspapers across the country. That night, Amara requested a simple king room on a middle floor rather than the presidential suite. She sat beside the window and removed the thin gold chain from her neck. She placed her mother's wedding ring and pearl earrings on the nightstand. Then she whispered into the quiet room, "We did it, Mama." Amara began to cry. It was the only time she cried throughout the entire story. Below the window, Fifth Avenue glowed beneath the night sky. Far below, the revolving doors continued turning. Beyond them stood the lobby her mother might once have cleaned. Now it belonged to her daughter. This story is fictional. But the feeling Amara carried into that lobby is real. Millions of black women experience it every day. They are ignored. They are called sweetheart or honey in voices designed to make them smaller. They are told without words that they do not belong. That is the part of the story that should force everyone to pay attention. Amara's true weapon was not her fortune. It was not her attorneys or the cameras waiting outside. Her true strength came from refusing to become the person others tried to force her to be. She remained kind. She remained patient. She remained prepared. And, when the moment arrived, the truth completed the work. The lesson is not that everyone should become wealthy enough to purchase the hotel. The lesson is that every person entering a lobby should be treated as though they might own the building. One day, they might. And even if they never do, they still deserve dignity. Every person does. Every one of our mothers did. Have you ever been Amara standing alone in that lobby? Or honestly, have you ever stood behind the desk and made a decision about someone before hearing them speak? Share your story in the comments. Press the like button if you believe human dignity should never carry a price tag. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of justice, courage, and accountability. And remember, the most dangerous woman in any room may be the one everyone has underestimated. Judging someone because they are wearing an inexpensive t-shirt says far more about the person making the judgment than the person wearing it. That $12 shirt might belong to a billionaire. It might simply belong to a decent human being. Either way, show them respect. Always.